ultimate crossbow setup. Okay, maybe that's a little bit of an exaggeration. Ultimate, perfect. Those are pretty high standards, aren't they? But I gotta tell you, now that I've completed a season with this setup, with the Burris Oracle X scope and the Killer Instinct SWAT X1, I gotta tell you, this, to me, is crossbow perfection. I mentioned that before in a previous video, and I firmly believe that. Perfection, again, that's a pretty high standard. I'm not going to tell you this thing is perfect. I'm not going to tell you that it doesn't have little problems that you can or can't solve. In fact, I'm going to talk about a couple of things in this video that I kind of don't like about this crossbow and that you want to pay attention to if you buy a setup like this. But overall, completing my first crossbow season with this, the early crossbow season in Maryland, killed a nice buck together. And then we headed up to Pennsylvania here, where we're from, where we live, and in the kingdom of Bunjie, killed a really nice buck here as well. So far, this crossbow only kills bucks. We'll get it on the doe before too long, maybe. The Burris Oracle X is a built-in range-finding scope, right? It has a rangefinder built in. It has also, in case you aren't familiar with it, a little remote. And you can push the button on there, and what it does, once you turn the scope on, you push the button and you range it, put the crosshairs on the deer, gives you a red dot with the exact, precise yardage that you are to use. Put that dot where you want the arrow to go, and the arrow goes there. What more do you want, right? That's perfection. Now, I had problems with these scopes, did videos on these scopes, but the ones I got now are working pretty good, and I'm real happy with them, and they performed perfectly throughout the crossbow seasons. I have perfect confidence in them, like you do get with gear when you use that gear enough. You don't have to worry about ranges anymore. Is this deer at 20 or 25? Do I aim in between the two or whatever else? There's no more guessing when you aim. You get that exact dot, and the arrow goes there. Again, crossbow perfection. That's what we're aiming for in this business, right? Pun intended. But we really do want that exact, precise accuracy. And to me, that's what it's all about, right? Accuracy is number one with crossbow hunting. Quick tip on these scopes: when you install them, make sure you push the scope all the way forward. There's a lug on the bottom, and you want to make sure the scope is seated properly. You can slide it back and forth, see? You got to make sure that that lug is slid all the way forward, pushing it that way. You can see I've added a little bubble level here, and that is perfect on this crossbow. This setup is so nice because when I lift the crossbow up and shoulder and get ready to shoot, I can look at that bubble and tell if I'm in the ballpark. I can see it perfectly, and I can look through the scope at the same time. I can see both. Shift my eye without moving my scope, without moving my head or anything like that. I can shift my eye between the two different levels. And there's a level built into the scope, but this is get you in the ballpark right off the bat. Level in the scope is a lot more sensitive at distance once you've ranged at a longer distance. It isn't real sensitive up close at 20, 30 yards, but then again, you know, canting isn't as much of an issue at 20 or 30 yards as it will be at 40, 50, and beyond. When it comes to putting the scope on level, unlike your speed ring scopes where you can twist them inside the rings, this one you really can't adjust to cant it. It's built in that way. So if you got one that's crooked from the factory, you're going to have them fix it or replace it. They have a lifetime forever warranty, so that's just something to keep in mind. But you can always line it up with a doorway and make sure that it's dead on. That way you're not out there shooting and can't figure out what's wrong with it. To check and see if your crossbow scope is level, what I've been doing, and it seems to work pretty well, get yourself a little level, put on there some part of the rail. This isn't a closed barrel, so I can't put it on the rail. But if you have a traditional crossbow with a rail, you can put a level right on the rail when it's uncocked there, no problem. And we'll put it right on there like that. Make sure that that is level. And I'm going to glue that on here for future reference. And then line your scope up on a nice secure rest like this, right? And then look through your scope. See how that lines up? Best I'm going to do with the video. Every time I touch it, it moves it. But make sure that your vertical line, the speed scopes are great because you can twist that tube inside the rings and line it up. But that doorway over there, get a level on that too and make sure that's plumb. Make sure it's straight up and down. And then you won't have any problem. But that's a cheap way, quick way to make sure that your scope is up and down. So I just picked this up. Haven't shot it since I shot my big buck here in Pennsylvania. And the battery's dead in the scope. So it's been a couple of weeks because I've been working so much. It has been a couple of weeks and the battery has gone sour on us, right? The battery in the Burris Oracle X. zoom in here. You guys that have these scopes, you know what a pain this is. And normally you'd be like, oh no, I got to take this off, and it's going to be so hard to put it back on, and the battery will be so hard to change out and everything. And that's all true. But there is a solution. We dump out the battery. There it is. We set that battery there. Then we'll go into our little package right over here. And we're going to get the other battery out here if we can. The battery in. The batteries go in like that. And then if you've ever tried to do this, you guys that have this scope know what a pain that is. This is what we were doing. The dowel made by a friend of Bunjie, Jim, One-Eyed Archer. This works pretty good. The idea behind it is you put the cap in like this, and it helps you get, because you can't get your fingers down there, and it lines it up a little better, and you can screw it in that way. But this little tool is so cool. Check this out. Cap is like recessed on one side and higher on the other. This little tool actually is made perfect to accommodate that. And look at that, it lines right up. Look at that. See how cool that is? It lines up a little better. You just line it up and screw it down like that. And look at that. Boom. You need to get one of these if you have a Burris Oracle X. I'm telling you, they're fantastic. I bought a couple of these, got one in a backpack, all that good stuff, so I've always got one on hand. Now, here's a big one on the crossbow itself, a big problem. If you've got one of these, watch out for this. The strings and cables that came on this are inferior. Now, it's not true of every one of them that you buy, but this is an older production model, I think, is what I received. And because of that, it had the original strings and cables on it, the original design. Those are really just not the best fit for this crossbow with the X cams. They have loops on them, on those original strings, that were too big. And as they're working their way around the cams, they were rubbing, the serving started to separate. You might see fuzzy fibers sticking out around on the cams, that sort of thing. But keep an eye on those servings. If they are going, you're going to want to get them changed immediately, like I did, because what happens is if you don't change them and they break, the limbs break. Now, I know what you're going to say, should have stuck with the Excalibur, you're going to change the string yourself, blah, blah, blah. I really do want to get into using a press for crossbows, because I think that's like the next step, right? I went from a recurve for years and years, doing all the work myself, what little work there was to do on it. And then with the Scorpid, I was able to change the string myself with a dowel rod, all that good stuff. And I got real good at it. I got the timing perfect on that Scorpid. So that was like my introduction to crossbows with cams. Now I've got the SWAT X1 here, and this has cams on it also. This is a good one for me to put in a press and learn how to work a press. Jim has done this before. He knows how to do it. And with his help, it took 5 minutes and the strings were changed. We put the new ones on. I bought a set anyway with the intention of putting them on. These are wearing beautifully with no problems whatsoever. To make sure you don't have problems with wear, you really can't. This is an enclosed barrel, as you can see. There's no exposed rail. So there's no way to put lube on there or anything like that. Get a paintbrush and some Trident grease. I put it right in there, lube it up good every so often. And I lube the servings good and get in the cams good and shoot it a couple times, wipe it down, and it has performed perfectly. The serving really does not ride on the rail 100% like it does on most crossbows. It kind of floats in between this enclosed slot here, and because of that, I think the servings tend to wear a little bit better, despite the fact that it's a really narrow crossbow. It's 13.5 inches from the outside of the cams, so a real steep string angle. Despite that, serving wear has been fantastic. Another thing you're going to want to invest in if you have this scope, that wouldn't be a bad idea. You got the little screw here to loosen this up so you can adjust the windage, right? And then back here we have a little screw that you got to turn in order to adjust the elevation. In order to get to those, they've got those little tiny Allen wrenches, those little tiny screws that you have to adjust. Get a little tool that's got a 90-degree angle on it. Man, does it make adjusting this screw a lot easier. It makes it so much easier to get in there. Good tool to have on hand. For arrows out of this perfect setup, what is the perfect arrow? Don't necessarily have an answer on that yet, but I will say that the Dragon Claws from Wyvern Creations shot beautifully out of this. After 40 yards, I'm hitting bullseyes. Black Eagle Dragon Claw arrow. 150 grain broadhead. Burt Coyote Lumenoks. Total weight 498.6. Getting heavier by the second. All right, should be far enough back. I'm just going to eyeball it. Hopefully we hit that target. Boom, we did. 350 on the nose. Two beautiful shots on two beautiful bucks, and they were dead on. They went exactly where I wanted them to go. They performed exactly as I had hoped. I've got Lumenoks GTC lighted Nocks on there in HD orange, of course, because that's like my favorite one. And they shoot beautifully out of this. I have no complaints about them whatsoever. Next year, I might experiment a little bit with different vanes. And I might experiment a little bit with a different arrow setup, and we'll see where that goes. But I gotta tell you, on two nice big bucks, right up front, in the shoulders, through one side, out the other, the perfect amount of penetration. With both deer, I got a complete pass-through on site, right there at the scene. Deer didn't run off with the arrow, but also the arrow didn't go 100 yards past the deer, and it didn't bury a foot into the dirt. I didn't waste any additional energy. All of the energy was used up pushing through the deer and opening that 3-inch cutting diameter broadhead in the deer. Just enough energy to leave the arrow right there so I can go pick up my arrow, look at the amount of blood on it, check out the blood, and find the deer 40 yards away. You can't ask for a better performance from a broadhead, from an arrow, or a crossbow setup than that. That is crossbow perfection. When we talk about the broadheads, though, one thing that's kind of interesting about this, that I noticed about this crossbow, with the original Bunjie, and with Genevieve's crossbow, Bunjie Jr. and Excalibur Micro, and with the Scorpid Deathstalker, all three of those crossbows pretty much shoot the Swhacker broadhead, or the practice point shoots the same as the field points that I use. So in the backyard, didn't matter which one I was using, they're hitting the same. This crossbow is a little bit different. I have a handful of Swa-hacker practice points right here, and I've been sighting in this crossbow with the Swhacker practice points. This one right here, this crossbow does not like the Swa-hackers as much as Bunjie and Bunjie 3.0 like him, or Bunjie Jr. for that matter. Out here at 35 and 46 and 61, what I learned was at 35, we did pretty good, right? It was pretty close. At 45, 46 yards, it is low, considerably lower. And at 61 yards, which happens to be at the very bottom of the yard, here, the 60-yard backyard, again, lower yet. And I think it has to do with the lack of spin on these arrows. It's not compensating for the broadheads quite as well as the other crossbows do. These arrows coming out of here don't have as much spin because of the enclosed barrel. That's just the design of this crossbow. They shoot more like darts, right? And you can't put a real steep fletching on there, or a real sharp angle on the vanes, because it won't fit down the barrel. So you have a really slight offset, 1 degree offset, I think at most, is probably what you want to get away with. You won't be putting blazer vanes in here or anything like that. The blazer vanes and the Swhacker broadhead might be a better combination in order to keep them shooting the same as field points. But here's the cool thing. I don't need that, right? Because there's two setups in here for arrows. As long as the 20 is still on. What's cool about this, you can memorize two different arrows in here. I've talked about that before. You guys know that. You can memorize two different arrow setups in here. And what I've done is gone from bolt 1 to bolt 2 in here. 2. Retrued it under bolt 2, a whole separate setting. It memorizes the spots for the Swhackers, where those Swhacker field points, Swhacker practice points are hitting. Now, all I got to do is hunt on bolt 2 and shoot target on bolt 1. I can tell you that at 30 and 32 yards, I had no appreciable ducking of the string. That's pretty cool. I had exactly 0 on a buck that didn't know I was there. And another buck I had stopped at 32 yards, shot him, and he ducked an inch, maybe 2 inches by the time the arrow got there, but no appreciable change in the point of impact, really. It was really just a perfect setup. Both of them were, I couldn't have asked for a better shooting experience, a better hunting experience than those two hunts. Another thing that makes this kind of a perfect setup is its overall footprint, right? Not a real big crossbow, 13.5 inches wide to the outside of the cams, which to me is the only measurement that really matters. But it doesn't take up a lot of room in a tree stand either, 25 inches long or so, right? 24.5 inches long. So when you're moving around a tree stand, you got deer in front of you, there's less real estate here, less for them to see, less movement because there's less physical mass. The deer didn't seem to pick up on it in the scenarios that I was in with these, and there was multiple deer, both deer that I shot, there were multiple multiple deer in front of me at the time. That's a wonderful thing. It's a beautiful thing. And once you realize the benefits of a smaller crossbow, man, is that something I just was never exposed to. Even the Scorpion Deathstalker is considerably wider than this and just takes up a lot more in front of you. This was just a joy to use in a tree stand. Put the stirrup down, rest it on your lap, just pick it up and shoot. In a blind, you can set it on the stirrup and stand it up in the corner, and it doesn't take up any space at all. I locked it into the bog death grip in front of me, so I'm ready to shoot at a moment's notice. Had it right there ready to shoot. Seemed to work perfect. Doesn't take up a lot of space. Mobile stuff on the ground, it's a joy to carry around and sit there with it in front of you, not a big deal. People were asking me when we talk about mobile, don't we want to know what the entire setup weighs? I got to be honest with you, I don't know. Don't have any idea. Got the scope here, weighs just about 2 pounds. The entire setup, as you see it right here, right? The entire setup weighs 9 pounds. So I'll take that off of there and show you. Hopefully we can get that to focus. Can we get it to focus? 9 pounds. 9 pounds for the whole setup. Not too bad. Like my buddy Scott would say, it's only heavy when you carry it. And the safety, right? One of the reasons I was a little nervous about this is the bullpup design. The action's up here, the safety's back here, and you're getting ready to shoot, and you got to reach back here and do all this. I don't remember working the safety the 2 times that I used this to kill animals. So I shot 2 deer with this, and the safety was a non-issue because I don't even remember moving the safety. Apparently, there was enough muscle memory for me, having used it in the backyard, for me to practice it perfectly in the field. Not a problem. Here's a weird thing. Now, it may not matter to anybody, but it doesn't have a Picatinny rail. It has a Weaver style rail, which I had to look up the difference. I knew there was slight differences. It's really just a measurement thing more than anything else, I guess. If you've got accessories you're going to be putting on here that require a Picatinny rail, a certain scope or whatever else, you probably got to buy different rings because you got to buy Weaver style rings. That could be an issue. Tactacams, it wasn't an issue. Quiver mount goes on here just fine, but if you have your own quiver mount that you wanted to use, maybe that's an issue. A bipod might be an issue because this is a Weaver on the bottom as well. Those are things like you might want to take into account. Never thought I'd have to be concerned about that, and I'm not sure why they put a Weaver on here. I don't know. Don't really care. It doesn't seem to matter one way or another for any of the stuff that I use, but you might be concerned about that, and it might be something you want to take into account. The Burris Oracle X fits on here just fine either way. Don't worry about that. And the Tactacam, you can mount up here where the quiver mount goes. And actually, it's not a bad place for a Tactacam. The cool thing about a Tactacam on this, there's so little vibration with this crossbow that the footage isn't all jiggly. Man, I love this crossbow. That's a credit to this crossbow and the smooth shooting of these cams, how smooth this setup is. And it makes for a really good Tactacam experience if you're wanting to mount a camera on your crossbow. Pretty cool. Setting this up before dawn when it's dark in the woods and, cocking it, getting in a tree stand and all that. Not a problem whatsoever. Taking it down, decocking it with an arrow and packing it out of the woods after dark. Again, not a problem. Worked out perfect. Traveling with it, not a problem at all. This thing fits right in the back of the truck. Traveling with crossbows, just want to take a look at the different cases, the different sizes. Look at this big boy, right? This is the OB, original Bunjie, 34.5 inches long or something like that, 36 inches wide. This is the small case for this crossbow. Look at that padded case and how big it is. But inside there, that crossbow fits, but it basically is the size of 2 crossbow cases, right? If we look at Genevieve's crossbow, Bunjie Jr. made some great improvements in terms of size. Real nice hard case to travel with. Reasonable. Not too bad. Yeah. You put this guy in a hard case and it takes up the whole bed. It takes up the whole bed of the pickup, right? But what we've got and what I want to show you is, we'll get this guy out of the way. Boy, I love that crossbow though. I do want to show you this though, for those of you who might be interested in the Killer Instinct. With this crossbow, you do have to have the rectangular case. You can't have the coffin style case. As cool as the coffin style case would be, this is the case that fits this crossbow. So, opening it up, I do like the case though. Soft case, you open it up, and if we flop her open, it's just a cover that comes open like this. The crossbow fits in there nicely. You don't have a problem with the Burris Oracle X. It actually stays in there good. It fits nicely. I don't feel like it's pushing that button all the time inadvertently because the batteries are not worn out. It's not turning the scope on unnecessarily. And what's cool is, in one long pocket here, I got the crank in case I want that. I've got the scope cover and a rangefinder. Could actually throw another scope in there if you wanted to do that, if you want to have a backup scope. Anymore, we're in that day and age where we kind of have to have a backup scope now. But over here, look how cool that is. I got the quiver in here. And I've elected to go with the Scorpid quiver. So even though Bunjie 3.0 didn't make the trip with us, isn't here in Maryland with us, a little piece of Scorpid is here with us. A little bit of the slick black Cadillac, the Scorpid Deathstalker quiver. I do like this quiver because it snaps onto the tree stand, sits right there good. I can carry 5 arrows in here. One's a decocking arrow. One little tip on these cases too. I put this fluorescent tape on here. You can put something white or something because the zipper is just black. You can't see what's going on down in here. So I put that orange tape on here so I can find my zippers a lot easier. All in all, I got to tell you, the perfect setup for me, the perfect setup for the kingdom of Bunjie, in my opinion, a setup like this really is the definition of modern crossbow perfection. I love this setup. It does everything I've asked of it, nothing more, nothing less. With this crossbow's help, I was able to protect the corn piles in Maryland. I was able to protect our food plots in the kingdom of Bunjie and allow the does to eat peacefully and not be harassed by those bucks. We're able to enforce the rules that we set forth about crossbow hunting, aren't we? All it needs now is a name. All hail Bunjie, and all hail Bunjie 4.0, the Enforcer.